This always happens when I'm in a stimulating conference like this one. I've rewritten my PowerPoint in my mind like 7 times, like, oh, well, if they're interested in that, they should be interested in this. So I'm going to quickly go through some slides about very specifically the online course program at the Museum of Modern Art that I inherited almost 2 years ago from someone I think you're going to hear from later, Beth Harris, who started the program. And I just want to say that usually, and of course following Eleanor Fink, I feel very guilty about this, but most of what I'm going to show you actually isn't accessible to open. It's not open. It's these are courses that people pay for to observe and see, with one exception that I'll talk about. But I'm going to bring my laptop to dinner, and not during dinner, but maybe after dinner. If anyone wants to come and see the courses, feel free to come by, and I'd be happy to show you and tell you anything else. But I don't want to take up the time today for that. So I've been involved in the art, museum, technology space for a long time. Who remembers video discs? That's how old I am. I think I've had the privilege of being part a lot of times in collaborative museum education environments where we're beating our heads against how can we get the experience the way we want it to be with the technology at hand. And I think like about 4 years ago, the light bulb went off, and I thought, gee, I don't have to worry about that anymore because there's so many fantastic tools out there. So I'm going to not really talk about technology. I'm really going to talk about content building. I was trained as an educator. That's kind of where my head is, and I'm really glad to be able to focus on that and just talk about lessons learned in creating content for online learning, consumption, etc. So let's see. I didn't get any training on this, but I hope, yes, oh good. Now, I usually feel very guilty about showing this slide, but I'm so glad I go after Will, because Will just told you that 50 million people go to the Metropolitan website, and only a paltry 20 million come to the Museum of Modern Art. And I'm not here to impress you with those numbers, because they are kind of impressive. I'm here to tell you that about, I think, maybe 4 years ago, a little light bulb went off. Maybe it was one of those AMD museum director meetings that we don't got invited to, where they're like, 3 million people come through the doors of MoMA in Midtown Manhattan, and 20 million come through our virtual doors. And where are our resources, and what are we thinking about with all those visitors? And so a lot of digital initiatives, strategy sessions, things started happening where, at least at MoMA, and this is before my time, I was still with Will at the Metropolitan Museum, at MoMA they decided to try a lot of different things to sort of get the digital ideas flowing. How can we provide satisfying, enduring experiences online for all of these visitors who may never, ever come through our museum door? It's a big challenge, and one of the ways that we did that proved to be almost instantaneously successful is the online courses. And they're pretty straightforward. You can, at this moment, we have 6 different courses to choose from. Some of them are 10-week-long surveys. Some of them are 5 weeks that explore certain topics. We have a balance of studio-based courses. You can actually learn how to make abstract art online. And some of them are pretty much straightforward art history. And we offer them in 2 different ways. You can do them as self-guided, which means that we give you all of the information, and however many weeks later, we turn off your access. Or you can take them as instructor-led, which means that we have one of our MoMA educators accompanying a class that starts at a specific moment, and then along the way there's discussion sessions and students have a joint interaction. So that's basically the 2 flavors. And in 3 weeks we have a new flavor, which is our partnership with Coursera. This is an audience where I probably don't have to explain what Coursera is, but just for the record, it's one of the largest MOOC providers. MOOC is massive open online courses, classrooms sometimes. And we were invited by Coursera to be one of the first museums. The American Museum of Natural History and the Exploratorium is also our partners in this, to help them build a series of courses that are specifically for K through 12 teacher professional development. And to be perfectly honest, I was thrilled that Coursera asked us because, I mean, as Will also contest, it's one of the areas where we can never provide enough resources for teachers. We never have enough time. We never have enough classroom space. So if we can do this experiment and really capitalize on the resources that we have, including, by the way, a pretty fabulous website that we just rebuilt around our old website for teachers, which is now called MoMA Learning. You go to the MoMA website and type in MoMA Learning, one word, you'll go right to it. We wanted to be able to really amplify what we do sort of asynchronously in a way that would really help teachers apply the content into their classroom. So in 3 weeks, Lisa Mazzola, who's our head of school and teacher programs, will be teaching to, I just checked this morning, there's almost 10,000 students enrolled, or I should say teachers, enrolled in the course that will be offered. It's called Art and Inquiry, and it's really about modeling the kinds of practices that many of you use in your galleries, inquiry-based method, that we hope is the bridge between the content they can get online and bringing the lessons of that into the classroom. So the first takeaway for me is to really think about who's teaching your courses. And I'm going to really talk broadly, but it's as relevant to asynchronous learning as it is to synchronous learning. And we are fortunate at MoMA to have a very large staff of contractuals, all of whom have been teaching at MoMA for a really long time. They're super familiar with their collection. They're super familiar with the kind of questions that visitors have. And we often draw on their expertise to create the courses. Speaking about the asynchronous stuff, it's often a challenge. Probably most of you, like me, was trained to do live teaching like this, right? And so a lot of the magic that happens is us being, someone else spoke about this morning, us being able to interpret where you are and being able to guide the conversation around so that you can really, so I can teach you where you're at. Well, if you're teaching asynchronously, good luck with that. So some of the teachers find it really difficult to be live and spontaneous and engaging on video. You bring in the camera and they become the most boring people in the world. So some of it is a lot of coaching on our part to encourage them to be just as spontaneous, to love the camera, to imagine the people behind the camera looking at you and wondering what they might be asking. And that's, a lot of that is training, but sometimes it just doesn't stick. So my advice to you is, don't just use the teacher because they're great in a certain environment. You really have to give them training, give them support, and a lot of practice to be good at it. And, I also have to say we use a variety of teachers with different backgrounds. So, for example, Katerina, who's cutting out the Matisse cutout, it's not so easy to be, presentable on camera and do art at the same time. So that's something that you need to have a lot of practice with so that your students are actually, hearing what you're saying, processing what you're saying, but also following what you're doing. Much worse than chewing gum and walking, I can say. And then at MoMA, we also have a lot of educators who work in different capacities, and we often try to match them with the content. So, for example, Corey D'Augustine down on the right, he's not only an artist himself, but he's also an art historian and a conservator. So he's great at being able to talk about the art studio activities and making that relevant into the galleries, which is what he's doing there with the de Kooning. We also do synchronous teaching. This is Stephanie Powell, one of my colleagues in MoMA Education. And we found that Google Hangout is a really useful tool. We're probably going to integrate some Google Hangout sessions in our Coursera course. And we had to really think about that carefully. Many of the online tools that we all love to use to teach don't have the scalability to be able to handle, let's say, 10,000 students show up all at one time. You could really crash a system. So Google Hangout is one of those tools that could actually handle that kind of mass attendance. This is a phrase that, I don't know, came out of thin air about the gold nuggets, and I think it's kind of a weird thing, but now everyone on my team knows what I mean. So when you're teaching online, teaching about art, you don't have the magic of the presence of the object, right? You don't have that ability to really draw people in because the real object is there. And I think you could do a lot of things. I was really impressed with the Pompeii walkthrough to build the magic around the object, but don't forget about the magic that's in your museums. There's a lot of magic in there. Each of you have sat down to lunch with one of your colleagues and learned this tremendous story about something in your collection that you never knew. And guess what? That story is really interesting to the students as well. I had that opportunity with a conservator at MoMA who was telling me about his 3-year trek of restoring a Namjoon Pike sculpture. And he was telling me the most amazing stories of how he was finding old TV parts on eBay and how many different experts he had to find in the tri-state area to make the sculpture work. And I'm like, we have to capture this on video. And he's like, wow, you're right. So we actually did a time-lapse video of the whole sculpture coming together at the end of the conservation, and now that's part of the course. So there's a lot of golden nuggets. There's expertise everywhere: conservation, curatorial, archives. Told a story about MoMA having a TV program in 1940. Who knew? She knew because she did that research, but it's the kind of stuff you would never have in an exhibition. And I'm not going to say that's at all a replacement for the real object, but it really means something to the online students when they can have a connection with something that is just as good as if they were there. Seeing a video and seeing the experts tell the story is just as good. And you know what? When I teach in the MoMA, sometimes I can't get those experts to come and tell me that story. So they're getting something that even my on-site students don't get. So this is just to remind me to tell you that in our courses every week I try to find golden nuggets everywhere. And that's to tell you that this is one of our curators who reproduced a Fluxus art score for us. Fluxus is a kind of art that's really hard for any museum to display because, of course, it's on paper and it's instructions. But he offered to pour water into a bucket, and we now have it recorded for not just the course, but for the archives and everywhere else that we might want to replay. I don't have to tell most of you in the room about hands-on being important. In online, I just want to say it's extremely important. We do, every week of our courses has a hands-on component. Sometimes it's go to a museum and take a picture and bring it back and put it up in discussion. And sometimes it really is an art-making project. It just depends on the content. And here's an example. I'm sorry, it's very difficult for most of you to read this, but of the kind of discussion that happens in our courses. Those students who elect to take the instructor-led, they have this opportunity to engage with each other. Here, one of the students had found an image when they actually visited the museum, and they put it up online, and they said, hey, Corey, the teacher, what is this painting? I forgot to take a picture of the label. And of course, Corey is like in Japan installing a Japanese exhibition, and he's like, and then the other student was very clever, and he's like, oh, I found this online. Here it is. It's Stanton McDonald Wright. And so peer-to-peer learning is an amazing, powerful way to organize your classroom. And Corey is a master at making the students feel like everybody has something to say and it's all important. And that's not easy to do. We're not often trained to do that. And it's so important online. And I'll tell you, if you do it right, this is what happens. So the community of learners who are part of these courses, after they're done, especially the studio art students, they all form Facebook groups. Each class forms their own Facebook group, and they continue the discussion. So one goes to an art museum, they post images of what they saw, the others are really excited because they couldn't get to that. They post, some of them have local art exhibits, they show their images. They become a learning community, and some of them have been going on as long as the program has started. And of course, they all invite us in because they want us to continue to be part of it. And it's great because, in fact, I do a lot of my research based on what they're seeing in the Facebook group, so it's good. I just want to say, I don't have a lot to say about this, but we have, over the last 6 months, worked with a group of teens to work on a teen-based online course. We really had a very light hand in this. These are teens who've been taking our programs for a long time, and in the fall we'll be offering a free online course to teens that is entirely made by teens. The video, they act in the video, they script it all out, and it's a pretty interesting introduction to modern art. I think the goal we all have here is to really build 21st century lifelong learners. And here's my favorite example of how we use Google Hangout. These are seniors that are part of the Queens Community Digital Senior Program. And every month, one of our educators invites them all to dial up on Google Hangout. And these are shut-in seniors who would never be able to come to the museum. And they have the same group every month meet together. And they build this wonderful community about talking about art. And I think that's the end of my slides.
Thank you, Deb.